New South Wales, or as Australians call it when they're irritated, bloody NSW. It's the oldest colony, the most populated state, the economic heavyweight, and the reason half of Australia's stereotypes exist. Kangaroos? Yes, they're here. Beaches are everywhere. Sydney Opera House? Obviously. And yet if you step outside Australia and ask someone about New South Wales, they'll just squint and say, "Oh, Sydney, right?" Which is technically correct, but deeply insulting. 8 million people live in New South Wales. That's a third of Australia's entire population. Impressive, right? Except 2/3 of those people are crammed into Sydney, leaving the rest of the state sparsely sprinkled with humans and sheep. Most people couldn't pick the NSW state flag out of a lineup if their life depended on it, but here we are. It's basically the British blue ensign with the state badge slapped on. A golden lion with a St George's cross and 4 stars. The flag screams, "We are loyal to the Crown." Do everyday Australians care? Absolutely not. You'll see it at official ceremonies and government buildings. Otherwise, it's wallpaper. International tourists come for the icons: Harbour Bridge, Opera House, Bondi, Blue Mountains, maybe Uluru if they forget Uluru isn't in New South Wales. They spend big on hotels, tours and souvenirs. Domestic tourists are a different breed. They pile the family into a car, drive 6 hours and unpack eskies at a caravan park. They hunt bargains, complain about tolls and pack enough food for a week, even though the town has 3 supermarkets. And yet, domestic tourists are the backbone. Without them, half the coastal towns would dry up. New South Wales knows how to squeeze a dollar. You can climb the Harbour Bridge, cuddle a koala at Featherdale, or take whale-watching cruises that may or may not deliver whales. You can even stay in luxury eco-lodges that cost more per night than your mortgage. Tourism brings billions, creates jobs in hospitality, retail and transport. It keeps small towns alive, but it also creates tensions. Locals get priced out of housing, national parks suffer wear and tear, traffic chokes coastal roads, tourism dollars heal wounds, but also cause them. You'd think it's simple. One state on the east coast of Australia, big, rectangularish, hugging the Pacific. Done. Except no. New South Wales is a geographical contradiction machine. Beaches and deserts, snowy mountains and boiling plains, fertile river valleys and drought-ravaged farms. It's as if someone designed it on random terrain generator and then left it on shuffle. The climate is also a mess. Too hot, too cold, too wet, too dry. Often at the same time, just in different corners of the state. It's meteorological chaos. The state has more than 2,000 kilometres of coast, which is insane. You could spend your life walking it and you'd still die with sand in your ears before finishing. Sydney gets all the fame, but the north coast is different. Subtropical, lush, with places like Byron Bay that used to be hippie retreats and now function as influencer theme parks. The coast is everything Australia sells itself on: beaches, surfing, endless summer, but it's also vulnerable. Sea level rise, erosion, storm surges. Climate change has literally started eating New South Wales' most bankable tourist attraction. Say snowy mountains overseas and people laugh. Snow in Australia? Sure. And yet here they are, the highest peaks on the continent, capped with white in winter, swarming with kangaroos in summer. Mount Kosciuszko, a modest 2,228 metres high, is technically the tallest mountain in Australia. Europeans would call it a hill, but Aussies treat it like Everest. The mountains matter. There are ski resorts and national parks. They're also the water source for the Murray-Darling Basin, the agricultural heart of half the continent. Running down eastern Australia like a spine, the Great Dividing Range cuts New South Wales in half. On one side, the lush coastal strip. On the other, the interior plains, where drought is the default setting. Cross the range, and it's like walking into another country. This is why NSW is so geographically weird. Mountains force rain to drop on the coast, leaving the inland dry. Farmers curse the range, city folk praise it for making Sydney green. Both are right. Beyond the mountains lies most of New South Wales, the inland. It's huge, it's flat, and it's often dry enough to make you wonder how anything grows. This is farming country. Rivers, like the Darling and the Murrumbidgee, go through it, but they're unreliable, often reduced to muddy trickles thanks to drought, over-extraction and climate change. There are long highways, red dust and the occasional roadhouse. Towns pop up like mirages, then nothing again. The kind of landscape that either inspires poetry or drives you insane. New South Wales is the economic giant of Australia, the engine and the cash cow. Roughly a third of the country's GDP comes from this one state. There's the finance towers in Sydney, cows in the Riverina and coal in the Hunter Valley. Sydney is the beating financial heart with banks, insurance companies and stock exchanges. Out west it's a different universe. Wheat, cotton, cattle, sheep and oranges. Agriculture is the backbone of inland New South Wales and it lives and dies by rain or the lack of it. Droughts turn the land into dust bowls. Then floods sweep through and drown everything you just replanted. The Murray-Darling Basin is basically a giant political migraine. Who gets the water, how much and at what cost? Everyone claims they're getting ripped off. Everyone is angry, always. And yet, despite the chaos, New South Wales agriculture feeds not just the state, not just Australia, but markets worldwide. Coal is still king. The Hunter Valley, for all its rolling vineyards and weekend tourist visits, is underpinned by coal. Export dollars pour in and energy keeps flowing. NSW markets itself as progressive and green. The reality is coal money keeps the lights on, literally. Before we continue, please hit the like button to support our channel. If you're a traveller, chances are you'll start in Sydney. For much of the world, Sydney is Australia. The Opera House gleaming by the harbour, the steel arc of the harbour bridge, the beaches stretching endlessly along the Pacific. It is the country's oldest settlement, its most populous city, and its most recognisable travel destination. Long before Sydney was Sydney, this land was home to the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. The modern city, however, begins in 1788, when Captain Arthur Phillip sailed into Port Jackson with the First Fleet. What the British saw, as fortune was, for the Gadigal, catastrophe. Disease, displacement and violence followed. Convicts built roads, wharves and barracks. Officers claimed land and established authority. By the early 1800s, free settlers began arriving and transformed Sydney from a penal outpost into a town with aspirations of permanence. The 20th century was Sydney's glow-up. First came the Harbour Bridge in 1932, built during the Great Depression. It was called the Iron Lung because it kept thousands employed. Then came the Opera House, completed in 1973 after delays and political fights. Hosting the 2000 Olympic Games reinforced this image. Sydney, as bright, youthful, energetic and outward-looking. It is the image that still stays in the minds of many who visit. The Sydney Opera House is the city's crown jewel, the one thing people recognise instantly, even if they couldn't point out Australia on a map. Designed by Danish architect Jørn Utzon, it took 16 years to build and went massively over budget. How over budget? 14 times the original estimate. At first, people hated it. Too weird, too expensive and too foreign. Now, it's untouchable. Locals call it the coat hanger, not because it holds coats, but because, well, look at it. Completed in 1932 during the Great Depression, the Harbour Bridge was both a lifeline and a statement. Sydney was going places, even if people could barely afford bread. For decades it carried cars, trains, bikes and pedestrians, basically everyone. Then someone had a genius idea. What if we let tourists pay hundreds of dollars to climb the thing? Thus, the bridge climb was born. Now, visitors in jumpsuits line up daily to shuffle along its steel ribs, harnessed like awkward mountaineers. Darling Harbour is Sydney's attempt at fun-for-everyone urban planning. Once a grimy industrial dockyard, it was revitalised in the 1980s into a family-friendly playground of attractions. There's the aquarium, wildlife park, Madame Tussauds, IMAX and fireworks on weekends. It's bright, shiny and full of people dragging bored children from one overpriced attraction to another. Sydney Kingsford Smith Airport sits barely 8 kilometres from the central business district, which by international standards is enviably close. The airport itself is one of the busiest in the southern hemisphere, handling tens of millions of passengers each year, and it often shows. Terminals strain under the weight of travellers, security queues stretch longer than patience allows, and flights arrive and depart under the constraints of one of the strictest curfews in the world. Between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m, Sydney's skies fall silent, a rare luxury for residents, but an operational headache that limits the city's global connections. Once in the city proper, the transport network sprawls like an organism that grew unevenly. The train system, built in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, still forms the backbone. It carries millions every week and connects the CBD with suburbs that stretch far into the west, north and south. But it is also a network plagued by delays, maintenance shutdowns and strikes. The newly built metro system promises a future of efficiency, though for now it covers only part of the city. It's an ambitious work in progress. Bondi Beach is not some mythical, far-flung paradise. It's a suburb, a perfectly ordinary, albeit ridiculously expensive suburb of Sydney. It's located just 7 kilometres east of the Sydney Central Business District, which is a mere 15-minute drive. The beach became a public reserve in 1882, after a long-standing battle between the government and a private landowner. The Bondi Surf Bathers Life-Saving Club, one of the oldest in the world, was founded in 1907. They're the ones in the iconic red and yellow caps, bravely saving people from their own stupidity. The beach itself is a long strip of golden sand. The waves are sometimes suitable for surfing, sometimes not, depends on your skill level or lack thereof. There are surf schools, of course, for those who need a professional to hold their hand. Bondi is not a secret surf spot. It's arguably the most famous beach in Australia. On any given day, especially when the sun is out and the waves are even remotely rideable, the water is a chaotic circus. The beach itself is about 1 kilometre long, and it's a typical exposed beach break. This means the waves can be fickle. The sandbanks are constantly shifting, so a great spot one week can be a mushy mess the next. The best waves usually come from a southerly swell, and they're often best on a rising mid-tide. But don't expect world-class waves. Bondi is a fun wave, a consistent wave, but not a powerful one. It's great for beginners and intermediates who want to practice cutbacks and manoeuvres. As for the risks, there's always the chance of a shark. The beaches are protected by nets, but they're not a perfect barrier. Fatal attacks are rare, but they do happen in the Greater Sydney area. The last fatal attack at Bondi was in 1929, so you're probably fine. Probably. Just don't surf at dawn or dusk when the sharks are out for their meal. The Blue Mountains of New South Wales are neither mountains, strictly speaking, nor entirely blue. They are a plateau, fractured by rivers, their sandstone walls cut and recut by the endless patience of erosion. And the blue part? It's not paint or magic, it's the eucalyptus trees. They emit fine droplets of oil that scatter light and create a bluish haze. Yet language insists on calling them mountains, and popular imagination obliges. Roughly 4 million visitors each year arrive to walk the ridges, to photograph the Three Sisters, or to dangle above the Jameson Valley in cable cars. Location matters. They are 60 kilometres west of Sydney, close enough to be a commuter's fantasy, but far enough to feel like exile. When the Europeans first came, they declared it discovered and promptly struggled to cross it. For years, Sydney was bottled up on the coast, and the Blue Mountains stood like a giant sandstone wall. Finally, in 1813, 3 men, Blaxland, Lawson and Wentworth, managed to cross the ranges. This opened up the interior of New South Wales for agriculture and grazing. You don't need to be Blaxland or Lawson, and certainly not Wentworth, to visit the mountains. You just need a train ticket or a rental car. From Sydney Central, you can take a train directly to Katoomba, the tourist capital of the Blue Mountains. Expect to meet some kangaroos, wallabies, wombats, and if you're lucky, or unlucky, a python or two. Bird lovers will faint over the lyrebird, the mimic genius of the avian world. It can copy chainsaws, car alarms, even your terrible Rick Astley ringtone. The heart of the Blue Mountains is a single rock formation, the Three Sisters, rising about 900 metres above sea level. Each sister has her own name: Meanie, Wimmler and Gunadoo. According to a legend, the sisters were turned to stone to protect them from harm, but the magic was never reversed. Reality says erosion. Newcastle is the second oldest city in Australia. It's roughly 160 kilometres north of Sydney, a comfortable distance that ensures you won't be overrun by day trippers from the big city. It's a place that began as a penal colony and a coal mine, grew into a steel town, got written off as a gritty industrial dump, and has now reinvented itself as a hipster-acceptable coastal hub. Newcastle sits where the Hunter River meets the Pacific Ocean, which sounds poetic until you realise the Hunter is also a major coal shipping highway. This city is the world's largest coal exporting port, millions of tons a year shipped across the globe. Newcastle grew on black dust and back-breaking labour. Steelworks followed in the 20th century, giving Newcastle its reputation as Australia's Pittsburgh, functional, ugly and working class. Then, in 1999, BHP closed the steelworks and everyone predicted doom. Instead, Newcastle started polishing itself. Industrial grit gave way to galleries and beach cafes. Today, the population hovers around 180,000. Hunter Street, once infamous for shuttered shops and rough edges, has been dragged back to life. Derby Street, a bit further inland, is the predictable eat and drink strip. The beaches are, unquestionably, the city's main asset. They are beautiful. Nobby's Beach is the one with the stoic lighthouse. The waves are described as gentle, which is reassuring for those of us who prefer our water sports without the threat of a premature burial. Merewether Beach, on the other hand, is for the serious surfers. Getting here is easy. Point your vehicle north on the M1 and be prepared to spend a couple of hours in the purgatory of Australian traffic. Or, if you've had enough of the road, the train from Sydney's Central Station is a perfectly valid alternative. The city itself is blessedly walkable. For those with a more sedentary disposition, public transport is available. A single short light rail line connects the interchange to the beaches. It's new and clean and remarkably short. Otherwise, the bus network is your trusted, if less glamorous, workhorse. And yes, a ferry still runs to Stockton. It's a simple, uncomplicated pleasure for simple, uncomplicated people. Broken Hill sits in the far west of New South Wales, about as far from Sydney as you can be while still technically being in the same state. We're talking 1,100 kilometres inland in a dry, treeless desert. And yet, it's not a ghost town. Around 17,000 people call it home, which by outback standards makes it practically a metropolis. Broken Hill is on the edge of the Barrier Ranges. The nearest major city is Adelaide, nearly 500 kilometres southwest. The town wouldn't exist without mining. In 1883, a boundary rider named Charles Rasp stumbled across a broken hill that was actually one of the world's richest ore bodies. Silver, lead and zinc flowed out of the ground, and a mining giant was born, BHP. The company's name literally comes from here, Broken Hill Proprietary. For more than a century, mining defined the city. Work was brutal, dangerous, and often deadly. The unions here became some of the strongest in the country, shaping labour politics across Australia. Meanwhile, slag heaps grew into artificial mountains, and Broken Hill earned nicknames like Silver City and the capital of the outback. Today, the mines are still running, though less frantically, and the city is trying to diversify into tourism, which is ironic because it still smells vaguely of ore dust. The Indian Pacific, the Sydney to Perth transcontinental train, stops in Broken Hill. It's romantic in a colonial luxury sort of way, if you ignore the price tag. NSW Trainlink also runs a more modest explorer service from Sydney. It's long, slow and very regional. Coffs Harbour is a name that sounds almost too casual for what it contains. A harbour, yes, but also beaches, mountains, banana plantations, and an odd tension between small-town leisure and national tourism cliché. Located on the mid-north coast of New South Wales, about halfway between Sydney and Brisbane, it sits where the Great Dividing Range tumbles towards the Pacific. The coastline defines the place first. Curving beaches, Jetty Beach, Park Beach, Diggers, stretch in crescents of sand so bright they almost glare at noon. Offshore, the solitary Islands Marine Park protects coral reefs and sea life, one of the few spots where tropical and temperate currents overlap. Warm waters from the Coral Sea drift south, cold waters from the Tasman drift north, and they meet in uneasy negotiation. The result? Turtles, dolphins, migrating whales, subtropical fish, all layered into one marine ecology. Tourists book whale-watching tours, marine biologists take notes, local fishermen mutter about stocks. Everyone is paying attention, but for different reasons. And then, the bananas. Coffs Harbour cannot escape them, nor does it try. Once the nation's banana capital, the city constructed the Big Banana in 1964, Australia's first big thing. It is at once ridiculous and iconic, a giant fiberglass fruit announcing agricultural pride turned tourist gimmick. Population is around 80,000 in the greater region. Transport reveals the town's in-betweenness. The Pacific Highway slices right through, a concrete artery that brings both convenience and congestion. The railway links it south to Sydney, north to Brisbane, though services are slow, almost apologetic. The local airport, surprisingly busy for a regional town, connects to major cities in under an hour, evidence that Coffs is more than a sleepy coastal settlement. In 2021, the city won the right to call itself Australia's first certified eco-destination, a title both impressive and suspiciously bureaucratic. And yet, beyond the banana kitsch and infrastructural pragmatism, Coffs Harbour is still about the Pacific Ocean. The sea is not decoration, it is livelihood, spectacle, and background noise. Byron Bay is Australia's most famous beach town, beloved, overhyped and overcrowded. It sits 770 kilometres north of Sydney and 165 kilometres south of Brisbane, tucked neatly into the Northern Rivers region. It's the easternmost point of mainland Australia, marked by the Cape Byron Lighthouse, which locals remind you of every 5 minutes. Byron Bay is lush, subtropical and ridiculously pretty. Population is officially about 10,000 people. Unofficially, it's much more thanks to the influx of travellers, influencers and aspiring shamans. Once a sleepy whaling town, Byron reinvented itself in the 1960s when hippies showed up, declared it spiritual and started meditating on the beaches. They never left. Over the decades, it mutated into Australia's counterculture capital, then into a real estate bubble so inflated it makes Sydney look affordable. The whales got lucky, whaling ended, and now humpbacks migrate past every winter. The lighthouse is the most photographed spot in town. You can walk up there or drive if you enjoy paying for parking. Views are great though, Pacific Ocean stretching forever and whales breaching in season. Byron Bay has become a magnet for celebrities who want to look spiritual without sacrificing Wi-Fi. Chris Hemsworth has a mansion here, Matt Damon drops in once in a while. Every influencer has passed through, usually posing in front of the lighthouse in floppy hats. Accommodation prices are absurd. Airbnb has eaten the housing market alive. You'll pay Sydney money for worse service and half the space. Expect $25 for the breakfast and $8 for a turmeric latte. You're not paying for food, you're paying for the Byron experience. Mungo National Park, out in the far western corner of New South Wales, is one of those places that proves Australia isn't messing around. It's not a gentle park with shaded picnic tables, it's the outback in its rawest form. Dry, remote and empty. Mungo sits in the Willandra Lakes region, part of a World Heritage listed landscape. It's really far from anything resembling convenience. The nearest towns are Balranald and Mildura, which are already considered remote by most Australians. From Sydney, nearly 1,000 kilometres west. From Melbourne, about 600 kilometres north. Either way, expect a long and flat drive. Mungo became a national park in 1979, largely to protect two things: the beautiful landscape landscape and the mind-bending archaeology. This is where the remains of Mungo Lady and Mungo Man were found, human burials over 40,000 years old. The iconic feature is the Walls of China, a bizarre series of lunette dunes carved by erosion that look like alien castles. The park is always dry. This is outback semi-arid land where daytime heat cooks you and nighttime temperatures can freeze you. The lakes here dried up around 15,000 years ago. What's left is a skeleton of a landscape. You can travel to Mungo, technically. You can drive from Mildura, Balranald or Wentworth. But here's the catch. The last stretch is on unpaved roads, rough, dusty, and sometimes impassable after rain. A two-wheel drive can make it in good weather, but most locals will laugh at you and recommend a four-wheel drive. Tourism here isn't mass market. You will only meet adventurous travellers, grey nomads, and history nerds willing to endure dust storms for a glimpse of the world's oldest cremation site. There are no resorts or hotels. Accommodation is limited to campgrounds and basic cabins. Prices aren't terrible, but you pay more in effort than money. Guided tours are common and honestly necessary. Without them, you'd either miss the point or miss the turnoff and end up stranded. What's your favourite state of Australia? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you loved this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to World Travel Guide.